Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. This Saturday, the government will be launching the Jamin Cojo Keluarga Malaysia initiative. According to the Finance Minister, this initiative will be based on the jobs guarantee concept to create some 600,000 job opportunities. But how do we distinguish between a wage subsidy program and a jobs guarantee initiative? And to what extent can such programs address structural issues in the labour market, which has led to unemployment, underemployment, and low wages? Let's speak tonight to Dr. Ong Kian Ming. He's DAP MP for Bangi. He's also a member of the Parliamentary Select Committee for Finance and Economy. Kian Ming, we understand that this Jamin Cojo initiative consists of three main components: the wage subsidy, there's a short-term contract employment program, and there's also the upskilling and reskilling efforts component of it. I'm just wondering whether, from what you know of the Jamin Cojo initiative, whether you see anything interesting, anything new, anything innovative as part of this program.
Good evening, Melissa and Sharad. Thanks for inviting me to share my thoughts on this important issue. I think the Jamin Cojo initiative is a follow-on on the Penjana Kerja initiative that was launched by the Ministry of Finance and managed by Perkeso. And the three components you mentioned are already in the Penjana Kerja initiative, whereby there is sort of like a wage subsidy for apprenticeship programs of 600 ringgit a month. And then you have these wage subsidies of between 800 and 1,000 ringgit, depending on the category. These are for full-time jobs, not for apprentice jobs. And then there's also a component for OKU and some of the marginalized communities. So I think this Jamin Cojo thing is a step up onto the already existing Penjana Kerja. I would say that it's not really something new as far as I can see, because the Penjana Kerja initiative has been there for the better part of 1.5 years. It started in June 2020. So actually what I would like, and perhaps you have some follow-up questions on this later, to see some sort of evaluation in terms of the diagnosis of the problems that existed before, and how this Jamin Cojo will actually create the kind of jobs that the Minister of Finance says he wants to create, especially in the context whereby unemployment has dropped to 4.2%. Although it can go lower, but I think the economy has opened up, so there's going to be a lot more structural and unemployment issues that job seekers and also job creators will face.
Kian Ming, I understand that the Department of Statistics has come up with some figures that are very interesting, because it does suggest, among other things, that there are almost 1 million people whose employment has still been affected by the lockdowns. Some 2.1 million are in the underemployment category, if you like, and that when it comes to full employment, we don't see a recovery if you compare it to the last quarter of 2019 before the pandemic. How bad is the situation when it comes to jobs, do you think? And what is the proper, solution for this? I mean, can a wage subsidy do it?
Yeah, so I think when you ask the question of how bad the job situation is, I think that is leading on to what I spoke about just now, which is the need to diagnose the underlying problem. I think it's probably too simplistic to say, look, previously the unemployment rate was 3.3% in 2019 before the pandemic hit. Now it's 4.2%. So we have an additional about 200,000 workers that are unemployed. But it fails to look at some of the underlying challenges, which is people may still not want to get full-time jobs because of COVID hesitancy in terms of going out to the marketplace full-time. You mentioned the expansion of the definition of underemployment by the Department of Statistics, which covered areas such as job mismatch, the 2 million workers that you talk about, as well as underemployment workers who work less than 30 hours a week. That's the 1 million workers you're referring to. So, without a proper diagnosis and understanding of why people have these job mismatches, why they are underemployed, whether they choose to work at lower hours or not, and also some of the other issues to do with perhaps other job opportunities that they have sought such as working and from home, and also trading from home, cooking from home, selling from home. So I think what is really lacking in the past 1.5 years is since the start of the Penjana Kerja program, what has been the progress, what has been the jobs that have been listed in this My Future Jobs, which is under Perkeso, what has been the success rate in terms of using this platform to hire workers, and what are some of the problems that, very importantly, employers face? Because if you talk to any employer out there right now, what they're saying is that we are willing to actually hire at above market rates, above minimum wage, especially in the Klang Valley, across all sectors of the economy, but they just cannot find the workers, right? So, I don't think any minister has come out to really explain these kinds of issues in a very coherent and convincing fashion.
So, Jamin, why is it then they're continuing with programs that were launched in the past? Are the conditions of the labour market the same in February 2022 as they were when Penjana was launched last year? I mean, is this just a continuation of programs that have, that have been launched in the past but with a new name?
If I were a bit, if I were to be cynical about it, I would say that it's a bit gimmicky, something that you want to launch under the new Prime Minister because Jamin Kerja under Keluarga Malaysia government, right? So, that's why I say it's not really something that's fresh off the boat, so to speak. And it really comes at a very, sort of like a funny time in the sense that in June 2020, the economy was still sort of like in lockdown mode. Now, yes, we have the COVID, the Omicron variant are, increasing the number of cases, but we're not going to see a sort of like shutdown in the economy similar to what we saw in MCO 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, right? So in that sense, as the economy is opening up, what we actually need to do is to have more novel and interesting approaches in terms of job creation and trying to address some of these mismatch issues rather than to come up with the same old gimmicks again. I give you an example. Right now, there are a lot of foreign direct investors who want to come into Malaysia, want to hire more workers, right? But this is contingent on them being able to hire a certain number of foreign workers, both at the B40 level as well as at the skill level, to complement local workers, Malaysian workers that would be paid above market salary, right? But if let's say you're not able to hire foreign workers, increase the number of foreign workers that have left the country, bring some of them back in again, you are not able to hire expats to fill up some of the more highly skilled jobs at the EP1, 2, and 3 expatriate pass level. Then what you're going to find is that a lot of the economic activities associated with these FDIs are going to be stuck. They are not going to be able to open up their factories at full capacity or their service centers at full capacity, right? And the kind of jobs that you want to create for locals are going to be limited by these kinds of structural inefficiencies that are existing in the marketplace and in government policy.
Kevin, what are the constraints in terms of policy options? This particular Jamin Kerja initiative is going to cost the taxpayer over 4 billion ringgit. Are the constraints fiscal? Are the constraints political, ideological? When it comes to thinking out of the box, as it were, to address this, what is kind of a pre-pandemic problem in many ways, what do you think of the constraints?
I think the constraints are failure of imagination and coordination on the part of the policymakers, right? Because, for example, if I'm the Minister of Human Resources, I will be facing pressure from people saying that, look, you cannot open up all these jobs for foreigners to take because that will eat into the local jobs market. You have to force all these foreign direct investors to advertise on My Future Jobs, even though the fulfillment rate is very low, right? So, each ministry is working in their silos, right? And you don't have, a prime minister who can see the bigger picture to coordinate all these efforts to sort of like tamp down political pressure in one area so that you can have a more holistic picture of trying to move up the entire job market. Then, that is when, there are a lot of policy failures that leads to these kinds of breakdown in the employment market. I'll give you another example. The whole issue behind the multi-tiered levy for foreign workers, that has been on the table for a long time, during BN's time, during PH time. probably even during PM's time, right? And I think this is a good time for the government to implement this multi-tiered levy for foreign workers, so that employers who are willing to pay more, they can bring in a higher quota of foreign workers, open up the foreign worker job market, right? In a way that I think is justifiable, given the multi-tiered levy system. Get rid of the option of having these employment agencies to employ foreign workers and then subcontract them out to different groups, whether it's in the manufacturing sector or the service sector or even the plantation sector, right? Make that market much more transparent, and then you'll be able to solve some of the political issues to do with hiring foreigners at the T20 level, because the entire ecosystem will be built towards job creation for the purpose of companies to be more profitable and sustainable, rather than to have this kind of approach whereby we are just trying to churn out jobs for the sake of churning out jobs without having a degree of analysis and understanding of what is driving this kind of job creation, right? The government cannot create these jobs. Yeah. It's the private sector that
understood.
jobs.
Can I just follow up very quickly on that? Because, maybe the policy or the program was well intended, maybe it helped some people, but I'm wondering, Kian-Ming, whether you see any unintended consequences or missed opportunities because we're focused on doing the same old, same old.
Yeah, so I think it is good to have some of these wage subsidies. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be there, because it does help some of the SMEs, especially those that have lost a lot of revenue and also reserves during the lockdowns. But there are unintended consequences. So, for example, if you force employers to advertise on My Future Jobs for any sort of level, right? What will happen is that there will be delays in the hiring of whoever ends up being hired. If let's say some companies just don't think they can find the kind of local hires, they end up hiring expatriates in the first place. In the end, you'll end up having a delay of rolling out projects between 3 to 6 months. And because of that, you can't hire the manager. Then the manager cannot hire the staff that's in the middle management and even on the lower management side, right? So this is the kind of unintended consequences that policymakers in this government, I think, are either not aware of, or maybe some people are aware of, but they choose not to want to ruffle the feathers of people on top to bring out these uncomfortable truths.
Kian-Ming, thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Ong Kian-Ming, MP for Bangi. There, we're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We'll be back with more, so stay tuned.
Yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat. Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku kat atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan pandemik ini.
Sentiasa memastikan suara anda, suara rakyat didengari.
Kenapa?
Membawakan apa yang penting di mana sahaja anda berada.
Kerana kita hendak putuskan rantaian jangkitan.
Belanjawan dan pendekatan bertemakan survival ini secara keseluruhan.
Teruskan bersama kami, Astro AWANI, saluran berita yang paling dipercayai rakyat Malaysia.
Kita berhadapan dengan situasi pandemik yang agak luar biasa. Self-control, self-lockdown itu penting. Lebih kurang pergerakan, maka lebih sukar untuk COVID menjangkit kita.
untuk tempoh 2 minggu ini duduk di rumah. Kalau kita boleh laksanakan PKP Kendiri dan keluarga,
saya kira insya-Allah kita boleh berjaya. Akhirnya kita menang.
Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat. Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, Kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku kat atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
Hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan pandemik ini.
Sentiasa
Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Sharad Kutin, with me, Melissa Idris. We're going to continue our conversation about the Jamin Cojo initiative and the question of unemployment, underemployment, and low wages in this country. We have with us Tan Ihan. She is the Executive Director of the think tank Research for Social Advancement, otherwise known as REFSA. Ihan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
When you look at the Jamin Cojo initiative, do you think it addresses the primary cause or causes of unemployment, underemployment in the country?
Well, if you see from statistics perspective, the labor market conditions have been improving compared to last year and the year before. I think Jamin Cojo is the government's way of looking to address the tremendous job losses. It is a good thing that they recognize it as part of our recovery process, which is encouraging. The outright commitment of creating the 600,000 amount of jobs is also a good start. It's a sensible initiative because, for one, there is a good focus on groups affected by the pandemic, specific mention on women, single mother, housewives, OKU, Orang Asli, etc. But for me, it also lacks a clarity on a important question of exactly what type of jobs are being created. I don't think we see that in the Jamin Cojo's papers at the moment. Are they, for example, jobs with higher value added, or are they low-skilled jobs? Are they jobs that will complement the industrial policies that we are going to focus on? Or another way to see is, are they actually future-proof jobs? Which sectors are benefiting from the creation of these jobs, etc. So I think that it should not be entirely about chasing the numbers. It's good that we will create 600,000 numbers and obsessing over it, but we must also try to find out, are we creating the right jobs? Are they being well paid? Are they meaningful and fulfilling for the workers? And are they resilient to the future demands required in the economy?
I want to focus on one of the components in Jamin Cojo, which is the short-term employment placement program. And I'm wondering, I have similar questions like you: what kind of jobs, what kind of pay bracket, what kind of meaningful work? My question also is, in terms of having kind of a short-term placement, is that the ideal approach, just having kind of 1 to 12 months contract in the public sector or in GLCs?
So if you see, for the last 2 years, the pandemic has started, I think understandably there have been a lot of focus on short-term responses that are aimed to prevent the immediate disintegration of the nation's socio-economic fabric. So, for example, to ensure people's livelihood is intact, previously in the Pemulih package, there's a wage subsidy to assist employers to retain workers. So, of course, now the focus is on creating new jobs. But I have to say that creating good jobs is a very long-term process. In the meantime, short contractual contracts would, of course, help in pushing to find ways to get people back on the corporate, on the jobs labor market. But it remains to be seen how it will be translated into longer term, like I say, meaningful jobs with good wages and not just low-skilled ones. So that will very much depend on the terms in the Jamin Cojo packages.
Right, Ihan, if the objective is basically one of social welfare, wouldn't it be better, instead of creating, job matching, all these things that actually demand a bureaucracy to run, wouldn't it be better to have something pretty simple in terms of, say, an unemployment benefits, and to tide people over as they look for jobs that have been created in the private sector?
I think they serve different roles. Both should be implemented because what you're talking about, the unemployment benefit, is like a bridge to help people cross through periods of time where they do not have a job, where they lost their job, where the sector is very strongly affected, such as the airline industry, the tourism industry, etc. But then again, we should also look at, from a labour market's perspective, from a labour participation force perspective, we need to ensure that there are jobs out there for people. Otherwise, you won't be able to maintain the household income of many families. The challenges, of course, from a theoretical perspective, you have different things. For example, like maybe the qualifications are not in line with the job requirements, or maybe there are low starting salaries, for example, that deter job seekers from getting onto the job market. So these are obviously things that we also need to address.
One of the biggest challenges I would see would be the job matching element of it, particularly as you talked also, you mentioned about whether the skills are the right skills for the job, whether it's a right match for the job. And there's also a component within Jamin Cojo, which is also about upskilling and reskilling. Do you think that is the right approach? I mean, all the focus, all the onus is on the worker to get the right skills for the job.
Yeah, so we do need a comprehensive national job growth plan that is aligned with our industrial policies and overall economic direction. So, for example, if as a society we decided that let's look into climate change as a mission for the society, or as a point that we need to look into as part of the SDG goals, then we can see, all right, looking at the solar panel industry, how can we ensure that the jobs in there, that our job market has, that our laborers actually have the skills to be able to participate in higher value roles in that specific sector. So I think all these are very much intertwined. Of course, earlier I mentioned about the qualifications not in line with the job requirement. That has been a challenge in our labor market. Specifically on inadequate sort of soft skills or industry experiences. So this is where I think that both the government and the private sector have to work together, what many of us call it a whole of society approach. Government has a major role to play in introducing good initiatives and policies to stimulate the jobs market and to help the private sector as well in that sense to ensure that there are jobs out there for many people.
Yeah, and it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be a sort of a paradox in Malaysia where, you know, we have actually very low unemployment rates in some technical sense, right? And when you look at the fact that millions of foreign workers, you know, make a livelihood in this country, suggests that it's not a question of no jobs being available, but the question of jobs that match the aspirations of the skill set. I mean, is there something going on in the economy that we need to be aware of? I mean, are we just creating more and more low-skilled jobs that Malaysians don't want, and low-paying jobs, you know, while Malaysians get qualifications for which they can't find work?
So I think I would like to highlight 2 points. Number one, and it has been discussed a lot, is I do believe that it is time for us to address the over-reliance on foreign workers in many sectors of our economy. I think one can argue that for years, the availability of the cheap labor could be one of the key factors in reducing incentives for companies to invest that would increase productivity and, by extension, shift our labor workers to a more productive role. For example, supervising machines in the production line, rather than, say, being the ones that are assembling the products, you know, that sort of thing. So we do have to address structural reforms such as this. And the second point as well is that it also addresses the question of the low wage. We do have an issue of the low wage growth. Our wages has been stagnated. But having said that, I think improving the job also addresses fundamental issues like decent pay. If you look at the recent announcement of higher wages and clear career pathway for the waste management workers in Singapore, that they are going to be paid by 2024, 3,000 Sing dollar. It shows that the good jobs are not just for the elite few, that it's not just about the 3D jobs and things like that, I think people would consider it and would do it. But also the problem is on wages. If it is being paid too low, you're unable to sustain yourself, then it makes it very difficult for us to shift away from the current sort of low-cost model that we are employing. So I think these issues needs to be addressed, and it can't be addressed in a we talk about Jamin Cojo is a part of the budget 2022. It can be addressed in one sort of yearly budget proposals. It needs to be looked at in years and staggering how and the policies that we can do to achieve that.
I understand it has to be a long-term plan. I really like that example that you gave about Singapore. And we was speaking to YB Ong Kiam Ming just a little bit earlier before our conversation with you. He pointed out that, in fact, all the initiatives under Jamin Cojo seem to be a continuation of initiatives announced under the Penjana package. And I'm just wondering, Ihan, whether we can take a look at other countries and learn what we can do a little bit better to incorporate as part of a longer-term labour market shake-up or reform.
Yeah, I think before we look at other countries, we have to also know that Malaysia is quite a unique. We are quite a unique country in our own. We have different factors that are not the same as the others. But having said that, I think globally, from a labor perspective, there are only a few things that people are looking for. Of course, number one is job security. You want to feel secure in your job. You do not want to move from one job to the other. And in that sense, the gig economy scenario in our country also needs to be addressed, because due to the pandemic, more and more people are also falling into relying on gig work. So reforms such as we should thinking about formalizing our gig economy, ensuring that there are social network protections to protect the vulnerables and so on. This needs to be looked at. So job security is one. And the other thing, of course, is on the the wages of the jobs. Will that actually help them to sustain their livelihood? Would that actually provide them a better future, provide food on the table for their children, provide education for their children? And from an economy perspective, I would argue that we also need to make sure that our jobs that we are creating are sustainable, are future-proof. There is very little to be gained if we create half of the jobs that we are creating are going to just be low-skilled. We need to make sure that they are ready, our labor workforce are ready for the future demands that will be required from us. So that is how I see it.
Okay, Ihan, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We appreciate your time.
No problem.
Tan Ihan from REFSA there, and that wraps up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharat Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.
Good night.